and welcome to Your Worth Your Way, the podcast that's all about helping you understand that you are worthy of prioritizing your own joy without feeling selfish or guilty. I'm Debbie Lucas, the Joy Alchemist, and each week I'll be bringing you honest, heartfelt conversations with incredible guests, coaches, thought leaders, and soulful humans who will share their stories and insights on self-worth, confidence, personal growth, and how to create a life that feels authentically yours. This isn't about quick fixes or cookie cutter advice. It's about real talk, practical takeaways, and plenty of soulful inspiration to help you live life your way. So grab your favorite cuppa, get comfy, and let's dive into today's episode. So today I am joined by the wonderful Renee DeVore, a former educational leader who spent nearly 2 decades shaping minds before taking a bold leap into the unknown. Leaving behind the familiar, she walked away without a plan, trusting that her heart would lead the way. And in 2022, she's founded her Soul Growth, a dedicated space to helping women gain clarity, uncover their truth, and take courageous action. And now she's exactly where she's meant to be, guiding others to do the same. And today we'll be diving into uncovering your truth, living the life you love, seeing your value, and believing that you're enough and that life isn't linear, it's an experiment. So welcome, Renee. It's a beautiful time to have you on this podcast.
Oh, thank you. That just gave me chills, just you reading that. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, and so much of what you've kind of gone through reflects and mirrors my own journey, and I know it will reflect and mirror so many others
Yeah.
that are listeners to this podcast as well. So I know you, as I said before we started recording, I've been stalking you on LinkedIn for quite a while. I'm totally fangirling that you're on the podcast with me. But yeah, obviously I know a little bit about you and what you do, but please share your story and tell us what led to the work that you're doing right now.
Yeah, well, my story is long and drawn out, so I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. But I was an educator for 25 years. I was a principal for the last 16 years of my career. But even early on in my career, I can remember when I look back trying to get out of that. So even in the first 3 years of teaching, I had moved from where I grew up to San Diego, California, and I was like, I don't want to teach anymore. So all these little points along the way in which I was trying to figure out what I could do different. What I've really come to realize is that I became a teacher because my dad was a teacher, and there was this really strong connection and need and need for approval with my dad. And so I got into education mainly because it was a connection to him. And so it makes sense that when I look at my journey and all the times I tried to get out of it, that it really wasn't ever meant for me. It wasn't ever really meant for me to begin with. I mean, I loved the work that I did and the kids that I worked with, but as I became a principal, the walls started caving in on me. It really just started to feel like I was there managing adults versus kids. And it wasn't until probably my 10th or 11th year into my principalship that I really began to feel like I've got to do something different. So much so that I took a year off of my career and I sold everything I owned. I sold my house, I sold my car, I sold everything I owned in my house. I packed up 2 suitcases and my dog, and we moved to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico for a year. And that was really a point where I thought it was a time for me to go explore what else I could do. But what I realized is that I didn't have the confidence or the tools or the resources to figure out how to get out of it. So I fell back into education. And it was the last time I fell back into education. I knew within a week of sitting in that seat again that it was the wrong choice for me. It was about 7 months before the pandemic had started. And so the pandemic hit and I was stuck. There was no way out for me. Um, and I had really begun to lead an entire community through COVID and all the precautions and restrictions that were in place for that with schools. And, come 2021, when things started to get back to some semblance of normalcy, it's when I had my panic attack and I thought I was dying. I thought I was having a stroke. And I realized that I often find myself in situations where I know I need to get out of, but it's like I have to hit rock bottom in order for me to actually say, okay, it's time. This was that rock bottom time for me where I just felt like the universe was slapping me and saying, if you don't do something about this now, it's going to be much worse for you down the road. And so I called my boss that evening. I said, I'll finish out the school year, but this is it. I'm not coming back to education. And in June of 2022, I left my career and I just kind of went on this path and this journey of trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do with my life. And it took me a while. I think, like you and I were talking about before, when you're confined in this box and in this matrix for so long, and for me, it was 25 years telling me when to get up, when to go to work, what time I needed to be at work until, and then even coming home from work, how long I needed to still work, and then time to go to bed so that I had enough time to get up the next morning, right? So you're in this box. So when you get out of that box, it's kind of like you have this full space to just be, and you're kind of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. What am I supposed to do with all this time? How am I supposed to be productive? Am I supposed to hustle? There's a lot of guilt that's attached to it, right? No money's coming in. There's just so much that's attached to this journey of trying to figure out what's next. And I just so happened to be coaching a former business partner. I won't go into the details of all of that, but she and I split ways, but she ended up getting a coaching role, coaching executives in this company and making $20,000 a month. And she was leaning on me to coach her while she was coaching these executives, and I wasn't making any money.
Mhm.
And I literally just sat back one day and was like, why am I not doing this? Why am I not getting paid for this? This is something I absolutely loved doing as a principal. I did it as a teacher. I did it as a soccer coach. And I even did it back in middle school, in high school when, kids would come to me and ask for help. So it made perfect sense that I would lean into this. I didn't know how I was going to start a coaching business. I just did. And it's taken me a while to get to where I am. But today, I really coach women who are kind of the past version of me, but different in the regard that I have done a lot of leaps in my lifetime. I've taken a lot of big risks. And I've jumped into uncertainty when there's a lot of women, very high achieving women like me, who are really scared to follow their heart, to follow their dreams, to live the life that they love because of all the fears that are attached to that. For me, I just took the leap. I always took the leap and always had this realization that there was certainty on the other side of that leap. And that's what I help women do today. I help them get unstuck. I help them get out of the uncertainty. I help them find clarity on the other side of that uncertainty just by taking action. So that was a little bit of a long story, but I think it's important for people to hear that it's kind of been this non-linear path to get to where I am today. But every experience I've had along my journey has gotten me to where I am today to support women just like me who are wanting to leap into the unknown, but they just aren't certain how.
Yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, like every single thing that you said there, like so mirrors my journey and what I believe as well. And I think, like you spoke there about like you resigned, but you didn't really have a plan. You didn't know what was happening, and
Yeah.
it was the same. Like for the last, well, pretty much since my son was born in 2007, I've wanted to resign from my job and just be there for him and work for myself and manage my time, but I never quite managed it until recently, and the pandemic was a big catalyst for me as well. But like I had like for about 3 years I had this plan of like how I was going to get to the point where I would feel safe enough to resign. And then last November, just kind of like I just went, you know what, caution to the wind, and I'm just gonna know, just gonna, I've less of a plan now for my life and my business than I've ever had. But I'm just like that certainty bit that you were speaking about there, that's what really resonated with me. And I remember doing a lot of journaling work at the time of kind of handing in my resignation. And one of the downloads I had was like, there are endless possibilities in the unknown. And that's how I dealt with that fear of like
Yeah.
literally stepping off this cliff edge
Yes.
and I remember describing it as, you know, back in 2005, I did a tandem skydive, which I absolutely loved. And it felt like that moment where I was back and stepping out that plane. But this time I didn't have a guy strapped to my back with a parachute.
Yeah.
It was me,
Yeah.
and I had to just literally spread my wings. You know, it's like the little birds that get pushed out of the nest. They just need to learn to flap their wings and fly.
Yes. Yes.
I just went for it. But I think, you know, it's like, let's just say, like, there's so many people who are sitting on that this side of the fear and don't have that certainty of like what is on the other side. And the way that I always like to describe it is that like clarity comes from action, and action and the clarity is what creates the confidence. So unless you do something, you're never going to know. You're always going to just sit and think about it.
Yes. 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 I think there are so many people who walk to the edge,
Yeah.
right? They're just sitting and hanging out on the edge, but they're just not willing to take the leap because they're so scared of what might be on the other side. And one of the mantras that I used as anytime I took the leap into the unknown, which were multiple leaps in my journey through this life, starting at the age of 24, I always said, gave myself an out, and I said, nothing has to be forever. Nothing has to be forever. Right. So you're going, you know, when I moved from my hometown and I moved to San Diego, and my parents were like, why are you doing that? That's stupid. Why would you go without a job? Blah, blah, blah. All the, you know, there's a lot of noise out there when you make decisions
Yeah.
that not everybody understands or agrees with. And once I took that leap and I saw that it was going to be okay, and I had to go through a lot of, you know, I think I had to work some temp jobs. I went and got my life insurance certification. I went through like all these little hoops, but all of this was a part of my growth. So when you walk to the edge, that's not where the growth happens. The growth happens when you decide to take the leap into the unknown. And I think also giving yourself that out, like if this doesn't work out, it's okay. I'll find another way back to maybe this space or a different space, but I'm going to be better because of it. I'm going to have grown and understood and learned more about myself because of it. So I think for everybody that you and I are talking to right now, it's those people who have walked to the edge, stepped back, walked to the edge again, and really are ready to take that leap, but they just don't know how. I think you and I are the people to help them understand that yeah, it's scary. It's scary walking into the unknown and the uncertainty, but at the same time, there's also this exhilarating piece of it. It's like, what? I get to create the future in front of me. I don't have anybody telling me how to do that. I get to take control of this life of mine. Let's go. Let's go. Yeah.
I can feel the excitement bubbling in me, because like that's exactly like that feeling is so amazing. And you know, it doesn't, you know, and I said this so many times on this podcast, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, the listeners or the audience need to go and resign from their jobs. You know, it's whatever makes
Right.
you happy. But you know, the bit that you said there about like nothing is forever, that was so true for me. And you know, like a couple of reframes that I had, like as you say, like once you make a big bold decision in life, people are going to have opinions about it. And I had to just keep saying to myself, their opinions are their lens through which they see the world. It's nothing to do with me. It's no reflection on me. And
Yeah.
like that, like, you know, nothing is permanent. Like, you know, and if this doesn't work out, then I can go back to my social
Yeah.
work career. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not saying I could walk into a job, but there's always jobs available. There's other options available to me as well. And I think, you know, the bit that you were saying there, like, you know, your journey isn't linear. And I don't think anybody's journey is linear. But what the way that and this is where the alchemy bit comes in for me, is like it's transforming the experiences, the good, bad, the indifferent ones, into lessons and blessings and
Yes.
wisdom that you can then create your life from. And it's as Oprah Winfrey said, once you know better, do better. You know, so it's like, well, now you know this is what's worked and what hasn't worked. What are you going to do better? What are you going to do differently? And it's, you're never starting from scratch. You're starting from where you are. You're starting from the wisdom that you have gained. And that's where the clarity from action bit comes in.
I love that. I love that you bring up alchemy too. That's actually my Instagram handle is Soul Growth Alchemy.
Mhm.
And I really had to understand like what alchemy is and what it means for me. And it really is. So this whole journey for me out of the matrix and out of the box for 25 years and into being a solopreneur and building my business has been the biggest growth lesson I've had in my entire life, right? Just really fully depending on myself. I don't have a system to lean on for money anymore. I don't have a system to lean on for benefits. The only system I have to lean on is myself. That doesn't mean I don't have a network that supports me, but ultimately I'm the one responsible for building this business. So the alchemy piece of my journey is also really, there's a lot of things that were hidden within me that I didn't get to see necessarily when I was leaning up against this matrix and this safety zone, right? Or I don't even safe zone, I guess. The alchemy has really been for me is how do I turn the shadows and the darkness within me, right? We all have it. We all have shadows. We all have saboteurs. If you study positive intelligence, we all have this darkness within us. It's how do we turn that into light, right? So that alchemy, I think that were speaking of, it just resonates so much with me because I didn't have a clue when I took a leap into the unknown this last time out of my career and into this space that I was going to grow a million times over again. Like, I don't even know if I'll ever have another opportunity to grow as much as I have in the last few years of leaving my career. But I'll tell you, there isn't a week that goes by that I'm not exploring those shadows within me, right? Whether it's comparison to others, whether it's not listening to the noise and judgment from the people I care about, right? Whether it's the imposter syndrome that shows up more now than ever, right? I can name I can name so many different shadows. But it's working, the alchemizing is really working on how do I transfer those shadows within me into light. And not only light for myself, but light for others as I coach others and understand the journey that they've been on, right? Or that they're about ready to go on. Because many of my clients are people who are a little bit further behind than
Yeah.
me, right? Those are the best versions of our clients as the people who are
Mhm.
the past versions of us. So I just wanted to say that because I feel like alchemy has really been popping a lot for me lately and just really understanding what that means within us as individuals.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it speaks to the bit that you often speak about, like about knowing our truth, and that's like the missing ingredient. And I think, no, our truth within ourselves is about recognizing the shadows, integrating all those parts of us, because it's about recognizing that those parts, the angry parts, the sad parts, the invisible parts, or all the kind of negative things that we would
Yeah.
normally see as something we want to avoid or kind of deal with and put in a box and never look at again. They served a purpose. They kept us safe at some point in our
Yeah.
journey. And it's about like owning that truth and owning those parts of us. So in your experience, then what does keep people disconnected from our truth, and how can we begin to reconnect with it?
Oh, I think it goes back to fear. Honestly, I mean, I think when I look at the clients that I work with and the reason why they step into working with me is because they're scared of what the truth might uncover.
Mm.
And sometimes it's that maybe they don't love their partner anymore or they're unhappy and they start to get caught up in the future. They get caught up in all the what ifs, right? So even before they've even resolved that fear or even really identified it, they're already thinking like, well, if I step into my truth, then what is that going to mean for my career, my money, my relationships, my marriage, like all of these things, right? It just becomes this domino effect of if I really step into my truth and I really tell the truth of how I want to live my life and where I'm unhappy and where I might find more happiness, it's so many people just get caught up in their heads and just look at all the dominoes that could be impacted if they speak their truth.
Yeah.
And so really it's for me, it's working with my clients and just helping them go, okay, number one, let's identify your truth. What is
Mm.
that? right?
Mhm.
Why do you feel this way? What are some of the stories that you're carrying along with you that say that you can't have this and that, right? Just like you were talking about before, you don't have to blow up your entire career to live a life that you love. You can have both of those. So I think that that disconnect comes from squashing the truth because we think too much ahead of ourselves and what that could mean without actually doing all the work that we need to do within ourselves to actually make a decision based on evidence, right?
Yes.
Clear evidence. Um, After we've gone through all of the work that we need to get through within ourselves to be able to make that decision in the end. And most often or not, I will tell you, my clients will come to me and have conversations around, I'm not happy in my marriage, I'm not happy in my career, I feel stuck, I'm just checking off the boxes of my life. And it really is about not, it has nothing to do with anybody else. It has everything to do with themselves. And
Mhm.
so once we start to dig into that work, right? It's a little bit of like a light bulb goes off and is like, oh, well, maybe this isn't about my partner, or maybe this isn't about my career, or maybe this isn't about my boss who I thought was toxic. It's actually about me. I need to shift.
Yeah.
So I think that's been really powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the bit that you were talking about is like so many people that I work with and that you and a lot of my guests work with in like we're in our heads and even you and
Yeah.
I, you still end up in your head. And like I've been doing so much work over the last year and a half of just like centering into my body and just like really tuning in because we are energy, we're energetic beings.
Yes.
And when you can start doing that kind of energetic work and feeling into what lights you up and feels
Yes.
expansive and what feels contracting and like just icky, that's really kind of how I've started making decisions. And like that's how I was actually journaling this morning around joy. And like I've raised my baseline of joy so high that today I was what I kind of termed for myself in my journal as a joy neutral state, which to me felt quite low, but I wasn't
Yeah.
like sad and depressed. So I kind of had to like recalibrate and go, okay, right, okay, I'm not like dancing and singing and outside in the sunshine and all that, but I'm still not like sad and depressed. It's just like my baseline has raised
Yeah.
so much. And I think like that's when we start doing that energetic work. That's when we can start getting out of our head and really tuning into that.
Yes. 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 I'm all about energetics, girl.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, like a lot of what you've described in terms of your own journey and the work that you do with people is like building the life you love from the inside out, and that's what you talk about a lot. So, like, what role does self-worth play in that transformation? And what does it look like now that you believe you're enough, even when sometimes, as you say, the outside world doesn't always validate that or has different opinions about what you're doing?
Yeah, so I think that that's the work I do a lot. I mean, I do it with myself. I've done it with myself. And I honestly, I don't think it's a one and done. I
Yeah.
think that understanding what enough means, and getting really clear on that and how you define that for yourself, not how other people define it for themselves or how others might define it for you. It's really dismissing the noise of everyone else and saying, what does it mean to be enough for me? And I think even going back on your kind of your timeline of your life and saying, when did I feel enough? Right? Even recognizing those moments in your life where you felt like you were enough and what made you feel that way. And so I think reminding ourselves that there were points in our journey where we felt enough and reminding ourselves of why we felt enough and then clearly defining what enough means for us today, which by the way could change in a year, could change in 5 years. So always, I think coming back to that and reminding ourselves of um, what does enough mean for me in this moment at this stage of my life, and not in comparison to anybody else I see on social media or anybody else in my circle, but what does it mean for me? And I think once you get clear on that, and I'll tell you, this is hard for people to do. It is hard for people to define what enough is for them. What does it mean? This is the question I often ask my clients is, what does it mean to be enough? And if you can sit with that and journal on it, right? Find stillness. I like to listen to some binaural beats to get me focused and just start brainstorming without the thoughts of like, I have to make this perfect. This has to be the perfect definition. It's like, what does enough mean? And maybe it's, being, I don't know what it is, being patient, being understanding, being graceful with myself, being compassionate, all of those things, whatever that might be. And looking at that list and saying, does this what means to be enough? Posting that somewhere that's visible for you on a daily basis so that when you're on social media and you see people who are ahead of the game that you want to be and you start to feel envy or jealousy, right? That you have a a visual of what you've already defined for yourself of what enough is. And really probably spending that time with that on a daily basis. Um, I don't know if I answered your question, but I
Yeah,
think I
no,
did.
100%, because self-worth is tied to enoughness, because
Yeah.
like we're conditioned that love and other people's acceptance is conditional. Like if you even think, and I use this example quite a lot, like if you're not a good boy or a good girl, Santa's not going to bring you gifts. It's
Oh
like that's
yeah.
so conditional. That's like as conditional as it gets. And
Yes,
it's like
yes,
little stories that we learn throughout cultures, and other
yes.
cultures will have different versions of that. But like for me, as a recovering people pleaser, as many of us are, and many of the listeners are, like when you first said that question, what does enough mean, like I instantly went to like enough for other people. And I had to pull myself
Oh,
back again. I'm like, no, what is enough for me?
yes.
And the other bit that really resonated for me was like, what is enough for me right now? Oh, got goosebumps there. What is enough for me right now? Because as you say, like if we start living in the future, then like that, that the future version of ourselves is always going to be a couple of steps ahead of where we are just now. And yeah, we can do things to collapse and bring that closer. But in this moment, what is enough right now, and what can we do right now that's going to take us that step closer? And that's such an important part of like what I do and the work that I do. So that was such a good point that you made there. I don't know if you have anything else to say.
Yeah, I was just even thinking as we were talking about this, I think even breaking it down more for people of even thinking like physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, like even looking across those gamuts of what does enough mean across those areas. Um, I don't know if that's a whole lot more to add to what we just shared, but I think being able to hit on each of those different aspects of our life and understanding what does it mean to be enough physically, right? Because I could be in a very different place I am in a very different place physically than I am spiritually, right? I'm much further ahead in my spiritual game than I am in my physical game right now. And so I can be a lot harder on myself physically, right? Or I could be a lot harder on myself mentally. Than I am in other spaces. So it's always a moving target. And so I think just checking in with yourself on a weekly, if not monthly basis of just saying, does this still resonate with me right now? Have I shifted? Have I leveled up in some of these areas? If I have, then what does enough mean for me now, right? It's just kind of an audit for yourself on a fairly regular basis on whether or not you're staying true um, to really feeling like you're enough is how you're operating. Oftentimes, I think we try to operate on another level beyond enough, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like if you're constantly like striving, you're like, yeah, we should be striving for that next level. But if you're trying to operate before you're
Yeah.
there, it's
Yeah.
like you're not present in the moment, you're not
Yes.
appreciating the now. And that's for me, that was like one of my earliest shifts in my spiritual healing journey. Was like, if I'm not present, I'm going to miss the opportunities that the
Yes.
universe is putting right in my lap. As I
Yes.
said to you, like even this podcast was evolved out of like me saying after so many conversations, oh, if we'd recorded that, that would have made a great podcast. That was the universe slapping
Love
me over
that.
the head, going like, come on, girl, this is what you're meant to be
I
doing. But I
love
just
it.
didn't see it because I was so caught up in the what I should be doing and all the rest of it. But one of the other things that you said I would like to come back to was the bit around like looking at times in the past where you felt enough. And so like for me, when I took this leap into resigning from my job and kind of going all in on my business, I again that the fear that was so real for me, and I actually journaled a lot around times where I took big leaps. Like so, going to university, I was the first one in my family to go to university and study, get a degree. I came over to the UK from South Africa, when I was only 23 years old. I had a job and all that, but it was still kind of a big leap. I moved up to Scotland from London and got married to my then husband, and subsequently, divorced and separated from him. And there's all these times in my life where I took these massive leaps, but was very unconscious about it at the time. But everything always worked out. And sometimes if I struggle, and that's like, big life decisions. But even if it's times where like the imposter syndrome creeps in, I'll kind of look at other people who are maybe a few steps or years ahead of me, and I don't see it as, oh, I'm never going to be good enough as them. I see it as evidence that, well, if it works for them, it can work for me. If they can do it, so can I.
Oh,
And then I reverse engineer that to, well, if I can do it, so can you, for my clients. As you
oh,
say, like all my clients are maybe one or two steps behind me, not behind me, but where I was a couple of years ago. And so I kind of see myself holding this little lantern up as the beacon of light, as you and all my guests are, kind of guiding people along the way. And it's not about the shortcuts, because you can't get here without doing the work. And I think that's what myself and so many of my guests stress, is like, this isn't just us sitting here going, we woke up one day and suddenly we were enlightened beings who could, resign from our jobs and trust the universe and manifest all these things. It takes the work, but if you've got somebody who can guide you and hold your hand through it, it's a lot less scary, I'll tell you that.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's important too, because I think when I look back on my journey, I was always a spiritual being, even though I didn't know it. Like there was a magnetism and energy that I carried with me that I didn't realize. And it wasn't until I stepped out of my role as a principal and I moved to Mexico for a year and I walked through that life that year without a title or anything else attached to it. It was just me, right? And I was also in a country where nobody cared about what you did. It wasn't about your job that lit you up, right? People weren't, excited about talking about being a principal. They just wanted to see you. But there was always this light and magnetism and energy that I carried, I feel like my entire life. It wasn't until my final week as being a principal, I decided to go get Reiki. I went and got I didn't know anything about it other than it was about energy work. And it was in that moment of experiencing Reiki and how I responded to that I was like, what is this? And why did I have no control over my emotions or my body in this moment? And that was the impetus for me to study and go deeper into understanding energy, which led me into feminine and masculine energy, right? I started going down this path. I started to take mediumship courses that just like, I wanted to know more about why I felt that way and why somebody was just walking around me with a tool of sound and caused me to react in a way that I literally had no control over. That was kind of my journey, but I had to be curious. I think that that's what people need to understand is that like when you see numbers, right? 111s, 222s, 1212, you see these numbers all the time. It's just getting curious. Like, why do I always see 111, right? Getting curious and even just Googling or even chat GPTing, because even just that little piece of curiosity can go, oh, I had never heard of angel numbers before. And now you start to dig into angel numbers and you're like, oh, now I see them everywhere around me. What does that mean for me? That could be your part of your, like the start of your spiritual journey, right?
100%, yeah. And there's like, yeah, it is the curiosity, because I think, if you're not curious, then you're going to be stuck with preconceived ideas or society's views. Like, I mean, a lot of the work that we do would have been considered witchcraft back in the day. We would have been
Yeah.
tried at the stake. It's like,
Yeah.
but thankfully we've evolved since then. And whenever I practice anything in a spiritual sense, I'm always grateful that I am able to do that freely and openly without
Yes.
feeling like I'm going to literally be murdered for it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's like, I feel like I want to have you back on, because there's so much around all the energies and masculine, feminine. There's so much in that. That's potentially a whole podcast in itself,
Yes.
much later in an
Yes.
episode. But um, one of the things, joy is a big focus of this podcast, and I
Yeah.
always like to ask my guests, what's one way that you intentionally create joy in your everyday life? And what advice would you give to women who are struggling to do that for themselves?
Yeah, I think that I have learned to probably follow my intuition, to lean less out of the hustle and grind and what we think is productive because that's what society tells us to do, and really leaning into my heart, my gut, my intuition that guides me. This is really taking for me over the last, I'd say 2 months specifically, as I studied my human design and I understand that I'm a sacral being, that my intuition really has to guide everything that I do. So when I wake up in my day, I have a little routine in the morning, but I also allow there to be room for my intuition to tell me what feels aligned and what doesn't feel aligned. Sometimes I don't want to get on social media and spend all this time. Sometimes I don't want to have coffee chats with people, and so I might cancel, right? I don't do that often,
Yeah.
but I really have to, because if I'm not living in alignment, then I'm doing things for other people as opposed to doing things for myself. And that's what brings me joy, is when I'm walking in alignment. And so I would say for your listeners, um, really tapping into learning more about your intuition, because we all have it, learning how to practice using your intuition. It can be as simple as having two choices in front of you, and your gut really saying, "No, I want to do this thing." Two gas stations on both sides of the roads, and instead of, letting your
Yeah.
gut say, "Which one should I go to?" You're going to go to that one on the other side of the road for whatever reason. Just letting your intuition kind of guide the way. I think outside of there being this one thing that brings me joy, the daily joy is that I'm walking in alignment with myself. And I think for your listeners, it's learning how to walk in alignment. That's the truth piece that we talked about earlier, is walking in your truth, which actually is walking in alignment with you.
Mhm. I love that. I love that so much. And it resonates with everything this podcast is about. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your stories and insights for
Ah,
me. And one thing that really stood out for me as a key takeaway is that bit about what does enough mean for me right now. I think, if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like you don't know what's next, like even just sitting down without but if you journal, great. If you want to meditate or think about it while you're out on your walk, that's such a critical piece to helping you just kind of tap into what is it I need, what's important right now, and kind of going from there.
yeah. And if you're really stuck, I'll just say this: use AI, right?
Mhm.
I know that this sounds weird, but if you're really stuck on figuring out what enough is, just write into, and it will just begin to spark some ideas for yourself.
Yeah, brilliant. So we've obviously got AI, which is a helpful tool in a sense, but it can be limited. So I'm sure my listeners will want to find out more about you and what you do, and how they can connect with you. So where do you hang out on social media? Where can people find out about your work?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, LinkedIn is where I spend most of my time, and you can find me under Coach Renee DeVore. And I'm also on LinkedIn, starting to build up a following on, not LinkedIn, on Instagram. And my handle on Instagram is Soul Growth Alchemy. And I'm working currently one on one with women who are basically in midlife, that are ready to take the leap into the unknown and really just want somebody to kind of guide them through that process, and be their cheerleader along the way and help them get to the other side.
Amazing. So what we'll do is put all the links to in the show notes to people can kind of get hold of you easily enough. So please go over and check out Renee and everything that she's doing. As I said, I've been following you for a while and a total fan of everything that you do, and there's so much resonance and synergy with my work as well. So it's great when we can connect and collaborate together.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. And I'm so honored when I'm in another space with somebody who really understands the work of energetics and how we are meant to operate in this lifetime. So I'm excited to see where you go and grow as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today, Renee.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Your Worth Your Way. I know that you'll be walking away feeling inspired and ready to embrace your worth and prioritize your joy. If you love this episode, I'd be so grateful if you could leave a review or share it with someone who needs a little bit of encouragement today. And don't forget to hit that follow button so you never miss another episode. And you can connect with me, find out more about the podcast, my guests, and what I do over at debbielucas.me/links. And if you don't already, follow me over on your favorite social media platform. I'd love to hear your thoughts and continue the conversation there. And until next time, remember that you are worthy exactly as you are.